Okay, thanks very much. Right, welcome to the Planning Committee on the 27th of October. This is quite a few now virtual planning meetings we've done, and they seem to be going all right. But you'll have to bear with us because sometimes we do have little errors. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements? It is important that all participants conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. Please put your mobile phone on silent. Participants must ensure their microphones are muted throughout the meeting. If you wish to speak, you must raise your hand via the raise hand facility on Zoom and unmute your microphone when invited to speak. Please do not interrupt other speakers. Members are reminded they should not have alternative communication lines open. If a member loses connection to the meeting, we will adjourn for 10 minutes to assist them reconnecting. To vote on matters, I will confirm the recommendations and request a mover and a seconder. I will then hand over to Sharon, the Democratic Service Officer, to call a vote. Right, so now we get on to the formal part of the meeting. The agenda, first on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitute members.
Thanks, Chair. I'll do a roll call of all members present.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor M.A. Thompson.
Here.
Councillor C. Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Assoud.
Present.
Councillor Burley.
Substituted by Councillor McCleavey.
Thank you. Councillor D. Edwards.
Present.
Councillor Gorn.
Present.
Councillor Hall.
Present.
Councillor Husband.
Present.
Councillor McEwen.
Here.
Councillor Mooney.
Present.
Councillor Knott.
Present.
And Councillor Seward. And officers, we have Jason Hipkiss, Development Services Manager.
Present.
Maureen Smith, Principal Planning Officer.
Present.
Gordon Robson, Enforcement Officer.
Present.
Jeff Dowker, Environmental Protection Team Leader.
Present.
And Debbie Storr, Head of Legal and Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Present.
And I think that should be everybody, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. I haven't received any urgent items. Delegation to receive notice from members who may wish to move any matter delegated. I haven't received any. Admission of public and press, everything's in part 1. Declarations of interest. Anybody got any interest to declare?
Yeah.
Bill, your usual one.
Usual one, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Please.
Same for you, Derek. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. That's because the members of County Council and we have got a report about highways on here. Right, confirmation of minutes. Do you agree I confirm the minutes when I finally can get in there and sign them?
Agreed.
Thanks. We can take consensus for them, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, is that all in favour? Yeah, aye.
Aye. Aye.
We obviously haven't got, we've got delegated approvals for the information booklet attached. Do you agree to note that on consensus?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right, we'll move on to the planning applications in the books. The first, we have got no members of the public to speak, so we can just get straight on with them. So we'll start off with, what's the first one when I can find it? You have that many devices going, you can never find anything on them. Right, the first one is the 74 Abbey Road, the former registry office on Abbey Road. So we will go to Maureen, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the provision of a beer garden on the former register office sites on Abbey Road. The key considerations with this are the impact on residential amenity and that on the conservation area. When the application was first submitted, I was particularly concerned about any impact on the residents adjacent and the applicants have worked very hard to try and overcome that concern. They've submitted a noise survey, which concludes that there's no significant impact likely to arise. And they've also made some quite key design amendments, one of which is changing the rear boundary of the beer garden from an open railing design to a solid wall design, which would be 2 metres high. So that should prevent any overlooking to residents to the rear. They've also submitted at our request a management regime to cover things like no outdoor smoking, use of CCTV, operating hours, and that the gates will be locked outside of use. There's also suggested conditions to any grant of consent that would be control over the operating hours, condition 8, and no events, live music, or organised quizzes or that kind of event to take place outside. That's condition 9. So I think they really do overcome those concerns about impacting residents through a combination of the conditions, licensing regime powers, and the amended plans. Likewise, in terms of impact on the conservation area, the current appearance of the site, as members will be aware, has quite a negative appearance on the conservation area, and it's a prominent site on Abbey Road, one of the main thoroughfares. So the agents have taken our concerns on board, and they've agreed to set back the beer garden from the Abbey Road frontage behind a landscaped strip with uplighters. So that should form quite an attractive appearance on Abbey Road. They've also submitted amended designs which show 7 trays to the rear of the site and a more formalised parking area compared to that quite informal arrangement that exists at the minute. So that will be set out really quite in a well-organised way to the rear of the site with railings behind, tree planting and so on. So that should really overall improve the appearance of the area. And I guess in the current climate, it should provide a welcome outdoor space for people to socialise within the town centre when rules allow. So overall, no objections have been received from the Highway Authority, and those were circulated in extra information this morning. So overall, I'm happy now that the amended plans, the management regime and the conditions should result in an attractive development and should mitigate any concerns from neighbours, and approval is recommended as in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Maureen, for that. Any member, I can't understand, so you're saying that they can't have smoking in the beer garden?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the management statement that's been submitted actually suggests that the beer garden is not to be used as a smoking area. I think that's really to prevent sort of out of hours use when people can kind of stay behind and staff and so on and congregating, and that's really for those reasons, really just to safeguard the residents from groups gathering quite late at night using the space. So that's contained within the management statements. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks, Maureen. It just seems strange. I don't know how they're going to have to be very heavy-handed with the policing and that, because when people usually go into a beer garden in the pub, it's usually to have a smoke. Right, anybody else? Any other councillors got any questions?
Chair, we've got Councillor Daniel Edwards and Councillor Hall.
If I go first, it's just clarification really, just from the artistic diagrams, it's showing a rendered white wall from the front, and I know that was in the Evening Mail as well, but just clarification, there's a bit of confusion for me on, is it going to be a red brick wall at the front? I'm just in concern with the heritage sort of theme, because there's a bit of contradiction between the two diagrams.
Through you, Chair, yes, there is a little bit of artistic licence with that drawing. The condition 2 actually refers to what would be the approved drawings, and those show the elevations, and it would be a brick wall to the frontage with railings above. And there's actually a condition that requires the brick sample to be agreed by us as well, so that we could try and make sure that it's a good heritage appearance brick really that would fit in with the area. So it would be a brick wall to the frontage.
Okay, is that all right, Councillor Edwards? Yeah. Councillor Hall?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Yeah, the extra booklet we got this morning seems to imply we need a turning area within the car park. Is that going to have a major effect on the size of the car park and or the beer garden? And the other thing I noticed that the exit from the car park appears to be right opposite Colton Street. Is that correct, or is it slightly further down? It's quite hard to see from the drawing.
Thank you, Chair. The extra information that was received this morning, there's actually no objection from the Highway Authority to this application, and they're happy with the amended plans. The issue, the turning head, relates to the next application on the agenda, the Salthouse Road application.
Oh, right, that's fine. That's fine. I misread that then.
Thank you.
The actual exit from the car park, is that right with next to, is it Colton Street? Or is it further down to, because it appears to be right opposite the where we gave planning permission a couple of weeks ago for those 3 houses.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the entrance and exit to the proposed car park is opposite Colton Street. However, the Highway Authority have raised no objections to the proposed car park.
Right, okay, that was all, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Thank you for that. Right, anybody else wish to say anything?
Councillor McEwen, Chair.
Right, okay, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you,
For some
Chair.
reason, I
Yeah,
can't see hands.
sorry. Thank you,
Just
Chair.
ask.
Yeah, I've no objections with this at all. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think everybody round the table would welcome it. It's going to enhance the bottom end of Abbey Road, as we know. Bit of scenery there. It's going to be good because 100 yards across the road, we've got an eyesore in the House of Lords, which is not very nice when you're coming into Barrow. So this will brighten the spot up as far as I'm concerned and get things moving. And I agree with you, Anne, about the smoking thing. I think that might cause problems, but that's for them to look into. I was just going to correct Councillor Hall on the thing that has been approved by County Council, and that was another application he was looking at. So I move the recommendation, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Is that seconded?
I'll second it, Anne.
Okay, do you want to take a roll call, Sharon? Please. You're on mute.
Sorry. Can you please reply for, against or abstain? Councillor M.A. Thompson.
For.
Councillor C. Thompson.
For.
Councillor Aswad.
For.
Councillor D. Edwards.
For.
Councillor Gorn.
For.
Councillor Hall.
You're on mute, Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Husband.
For.
Councillor McEwen.
For.
Councillor McLeavy.
For.
Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor Knott.
For.
And Councillor Seward.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Right, thank you. Thanks very much. Right, we'll move on to the next one, which is the, I've got my glasses on. Oh, I've lost it now, a minute. Which is the car storage compound at Salthouse Road, Bowen-Furness. Maureen, it's you again.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use of the former car sales depot to a self-storage site for 14 containers. So it's really a diversification of the existing car sales business use on the site. So the use is really acceptable in principle. And I think in comparison to the existing use, the proposed use will have quite a neutral impact on the amenity of residents and of the area. Operating hours condition is recommended, that's 8 AM until 8 PM. And the additional comments from the Highway Authority were circulated in extra information this morning. Those recommend a couple of conditions as regards a turning head and visibility from the site. So recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions of the extra information booklet circulated today. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Maureen. Any members of the committee wish to say anything?
Councillor Hall,
Councillor
Chair.
Hall.
Yeah, it was really, it might seem a minor thing. It's the colour of the storage containers. I take they're looking at shipping container type things. They come in a multitude of colours, from orange, blue, green, etc. Are we going to can we specify a single colour? It would just better amenity-wise in the area.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Actually, 8 of the containers have already been erected on site, and those are a dark green colour, which I think works very well. It's a recessive, and they're quite well screened behind the fence. If members are happy, we could add a condition that the containers are of that colour or similar. The colour be agreed with the planning authority. I'm happy that would be reasonable to add that condition if members feel that's appropriate. Thank you,
It's
Chair.
just some of the colours are like bright orange in that, which, you know, if we don't do something, then they could potentially put them in. If they're all one colour, that's great. I would like to propose that we did specify to keep to the existing colour then. That should put no extra expense to the applicant, but I think it does look better.
Is that seconded?
Yeah,
I'll second that.
Right, okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Bill, do you want to speak on the...
Yeah, just a couple of things. Thanks, Chair. Maureen, I'm looking at page 42 at the bottom paragraph, the very last sentence. It says, there will be no external lights, there is no electricity supply on site, and opening hours, blah, blah, blah. Is this something that would be looked at after? Because 8 o'clock to 8 a.m, we're into winter now, it could be dark. Could this be a safety issue at night time or something? I mean, it's going to be dark at 8 o'clock. People might be still using it at 8 o'clock. And my other point is, before I go, there's already 8 containers on site already. Are these containers being used at present? Are these retrospective ones? Have they been used? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The issue of the lighting wouldn't really be a planning matter. That would be something that would be up to the applicant to provide, and they would have the expense of trying to provide some electricity to serve the units. So I don't think it's something that we could cover by planning condition. The 8 units that are on site already, I guess the application is partly retrospective, that those have been submitted, those have been erected on site during the course of the application. So it's for 14 in total, and 8 have already been erected. So the other 6, the other 6 will go immediately opposite the 8. So it's 2 parallel rows of units in effect. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. That's fine. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Maureen. No problem with it at all, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I haven't got any hands up. So do we need a consensus or a vote on the amendment to the conditions that Councillor Hall?
Yeah, I've got a move, Chair, of Councillor Hall and seconded by Councillor Edwards. So if we can do a roll call, please, on the recommendation with the additional condition of the colour of the units.
Right, that's fine.
Councillor M.A. Thompson.
For.
Councillor C. Thompson.
For.
Councillor Aswad.
For.
Councillor D. Edwards.
For.
Councillor Gorn.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Husband.
For.
Councillor McEwen.
For.
Councillor McLeavy.
For.
Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor Knott.
For.
Councillor Seward.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Is that unanimous for the amendment of the colour, or is that unanimous for the whole application? Because nobody moved and seconded the full application. They only moved and seconded the amendment that Councillor Hall said.
It was the
I'll move the
recommendation to include the condition, Chair.
Right, okay, that's fine, that's fine. I just didn't want us to get down the line next week and find we hadn't done it right. Thanks, Chuck. Right, so we go on to the next application, which is in the second book, which is New Home Farm Rampside Road. An application for a wind turbine. We haven't had a wind turbine for ages. We had loads of them at once, didn't we? And then suddenly. So who's doing this one, Maureen? Is that you again?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this application relates to a single turbine at New Home, which was erected on site in around 2014 in line with the planning consent imposed at the time. This current application relates to the issue of excess amplitude modulation, or EAM as it's known, which is the whooshing noise experienced with wind turbines in certain conditions. So conditions 8 and 9 of the previous consent are the relevant ones in this case, and they relate to a scheme for the investigation and control of EAM. So they required that the applicants, if EAM is found to exist with this wind turbine, then the applicants needed to supply a scheme for the investigation and control. So the applicants commissioned an expert study to look into the issue and found that the most intrusive sound was found when the wind turbine operates at high speed and in certain wind conditions. They also found, sorry, the type of double glazing in one property also caused a resonant sound which operated in certain conditions. So they submitted a mitigation strategy, and that involved two key elements. The first was stopping operation of the turbine at high speeds in certain conditions. So that's when the wind is from southwest, west-northwest. And they later clarified that they wanted the mitigation strategy to operate between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 a.m. Now, the second part of the mitigation involved an offer of replacement double glazing to one of the neighbours. However, the neighbours subsequently turned down this offer of double glazing. Since the application was submitted, there's been some discussion with the applicants as to what the actual requirement of the condition was. And your officers have taken a broader view, in effect, of what this means in terms of the investigation and control of the problem of EAM. Your officers feel that the meaning really is what a reasonable person would find the meaning of those words to be. And there are some court cases, for example, a recent Trump court case viewed that the wording of conditions really was what an ordinary person would find that meaning to be, although I'm sure that many lawyers could argue over what the meaning is for many months to come. So basically the investigation scheme that we have before us really relates to control of this problem of EAM during the night time only, in the applicant's view, whereas your officers feel that there are occasions during daytime when this is also a problem. And whilst we accept that it would be unreasonable to stop or try and control all elements of EAM because there's more background noise in the daytime, and also that wind turbines, that they seem as a good thing in terms of government policy, green environment, wind generation is seen in general as a good idea, there has to be an element of control when it is causing a problem. So there needs to be a degree of reasonableness, really, and the applicants have since submitted a complaints process to try and overcome this, which we welcome. We're very pleased that they have gone down this route, but again, it looks at the investigation and control of the problem during the night time only. They have agreed to put in place a complaints procedure for neighbours so that they can easily complain to the company, they can investigate when the noise problem is taking place, and they can try and share those investigations with us on an annual basis. So that's all very much welcome, and we're really pleased that is proposed to be put in place. My concern, however, is that on occasion, and not on every occasion, daytime EAM can be a problem, and that needs to be investigated and possibly controlled also. So we're trying to work with the applicants to try and get them to take this on board. But unfortunately, their view is that the mitigation can only apply at night time, because that is what they're able to do in terms of their interpretation of the condition, and also in terms of trying to operate as a business. They're a small business, they're not a large operator, and every time they put mitigation in place, there's financial implications for them. So we're walking a little bit of a tightrope here in terms of trying to work with the problems that the neighbours are no doubt experiencing. As a result, we've received quite a lot of objections to this application, and we have done in the past for many years, really. Environmental health officers have received complaints, and trying to, equally so, government policy is supportive of wind turbines, and this is a small operator. So we're walking a little bit of a tightrope. So my recommendation really today to members is that we're nearly there with the information that has been submitted, but we're not quite there. And we require the applicants really to try and work with us. So our recommendation is that we go back to the applicants and say that we're still not happy with what has been submitted. We need to see more in terms of investigation and control of future EAM, and that is delegated to the planning manager to agree if satisfactory details are forthcoming. If those aren't received, then my recommendation would be that a refusal is issued within the next 3 months. I've asked Jeff Dowker to come along today as well in terms of environmental health background in the case over the last few years, and he's free to answer any questions from members as well. Thank you, Chair. I know it's quite a complicated application. There's a lot of technical data in there, so I hope that summarised the issue sufficiently for you today. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Maureen. Some of us have been through this on numerous occasions with the Isle wind turbine, so we're quite used to it. Anyway, do you want to say a few words, Jeff, or are you just happy to answer questions?
I'll happily answer questions, Chair, if anybody's got any for me.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Has anybody got any questions? There's no hands up at the moment. No, is everybody happy?
No hands, Chair.
No. Is everybody happy with that recommendation then? Is there a mover and a seconder?
I move the recommendation, Chair.
I'll second it, Anne.
Right. Do you want to take a roll call, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Councillor M.A. Thompson.
For.
Councillor C. Thompson.
For.
Councillor Aswad.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Gorn.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Husband.
For.
Councillor McEwen.
Sorry,
You're up.
4. I was on. Yeah, 4.
Thank you.
4.
Councillor McLeavy.
For.
Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor Knott.
For.
Councillor Seward. Councillor Seward.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Right. Thanks very much, Sharon. Right. That's the end of the planning applications. We go on now to our enforcement update. So I'll hand you over to Gordon, our enforcement officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a long time since I've seen some of you. You're all looking well. So good afternoon. The purpose of my report is to give the committee an overview of enforcement activity that's occurred since the government imposed restrictions in March in response to the COVID situation. Almost immediately in March, we were subject to a very, very rigid regime where a lot of us were required to leave the town hall. At that point in time, I was actually redeployed to work in Thorncliffe Crematorium to assist in most necessary duties up there. I think it's fair to say that it was a very, very sobering experience, and it just gives you context what the borough was dealing with. The excess deaths that were occurring ultimately ended up at the crematorium, and to see small families having to mourn, cemetery gates being shut, it gives context to a lot of the stuff that I do during my day job, and I think it perhaps makes you that aware of what's going on out there. The recommendation for my report is for the information to be noted. Due to the limited resources we have, our enforcement capability is stretched, but I would like to think we still continue to provide a robust and fair level of service to our community. During lockdown, it was obvious that there was an awful lot of anxiety, uncertainty, and worry out there, and clearly it's always been my aim to ensure that we try and cut through some of that. In addition to that, obviously, whatever we were doing during that period had to be reliant on making sure that all possible steps were taken to prevent further transmission of the virus. And that meant that during those months, March to July, we would only go out face-to-face for the most serious of cases, and only when we couldn't resolve them in other ways. During that period, I think it would be fair to say that a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands and were at home, and that prompted an awful lot of sort of latent conflict coming to the fore, where people were looking over the garden fence at one another, and existing conflicts were made that little bit worse. It prompted quite a lot of sort of people having the perception of unauthorised work that turned out not to be the case. And wherever possible, I sort of tried to referee neighbours and other community conflicts to try and take the tension out of a very tense situation anyway. It would be fair to say that I suspect one or two people would have taken advantage of the fact that my ugly mug wasn't on the manor. And clearly we dealt with that when we got back to full duties in July. So during the period, we've recorded 41 cases that have been investigated in enforcement. That's in addition to a whole host of other sort of member inquiries, stakeholder inquiries, and community inquiries. I always try, and I've said this on many times to the committee, I always try to adopt sort of conciliatory approaches wherever possible, and try and find areas of common ground, and try and come to solutions that both protects the public purse but leaves outcomes that are sustainable. In my experience, you know, if you go for a win-lose situation, that will always have an effect. If you can find solutions that offer a win-win and a compromise to people, that's the way I try to do my job. And with respect, I probably think that's a fairly successful way of doing it. During the period, we had 8 reports related to untidy land or property dereliction. One of the cases that particularly springs to mind was of a particularly shoddy property in the Ainsley Street area, and it perhaps demonstrates yet again that council officers on the ground are the eye and ears of the community. That particular property, when I intervened, it was obvious that the person who occupied it was a vulnerable lady. She was living in terrible conditions, and as such, I invited the assistance of my colleagues within environmental health. Their intervention meant that the property was actually cleared, as it was detrimental to public health. Such was the state of that property. Again, it demonstrates my holistic approach to these things, and a multi-agency type approach to try and get the best we possibly can for our residents and communities. I think it was particularly poignant for me. The lady who originally brought this to my attention, I updated her towards the end of this inquiry, and she actually wept. Such was her relief that her early intervention into a matter like this had led to a neighbour and a member of her community being looked after by us and given the necessary support that she needed. So a small situation from the outside turned out to be much more serious, and had we not gone in, then the outcome could have been far worse than it actually was. On another example, in terms of untidy land, your committee may recall that an application was submitted and refused at the Methodist Church at Hartington Street. Unfortunately, that piece of land was showing the signs of neglect. It was being fly-tipped. The undergrowth was overgrown, and it was becoming a bit of an eyesore. Again, I managed to get a good rapport with the owners or the trustees of the land, and I worked with other agencies, and in the end, I actually managed to harness the services of some offenders, and we had the offender community team clear the land up. It's now probably an asset to the community rather than a liability. And again, it just demonstrates that there's more ways than one to skin a cat. And if you think outside the box, sometimes you can get things done in a different way than would normally be the case. Again, in terms of untidy land, there is a long-standing issue with the corner plot on Abbey Road. We've served a Section 215 notice on the owner of that. He was a little bit absent without leave during lockdown, and certainly the notice of the 215 has polarised his attention once more. He's had a deadline set, and I'm pleased to report some meaningful progress has occurred actually over the last weekend. So I'm hopeful that that will be resolved in entirety, and it's a one that's been hanging around for a little bit, that one. To move on with the report, we've had 5 allegations of unauthorised development in conservation areas. Perhaps one of the most noticeable one, there was an incident in Vengeance Street where a member of that community noticed that the entire roof of a property had been renewed with concrete tiles, which were totally alien to that conservation area. The long story short with that is I managed to get in very, very quickly, opened up dialogue with the owner and the contractor. We did a little bit of horse trading, but we managed to get the roof replaced with proper slate. And I think that demonstrates, as I've always said, the ability to get in quickly and to have tough conversations early will always improve outcomes further down the line. When things are allowed to hang around for a while, they become more problematic to sort out. So I'm pleased to report that was very much a success. Again, it touches on the COVID thing. We had a situation in Askham where some gentleman decided to build essentially a decking platform on the roof of his extension, and he used that to afford some outside space for a vulnerable family member who was shielding. Clearly, it was totally unauthorised and would never have been given permission in any event. But again, I think common sense had to prevail there, and we balanced the needs of the complaint that was made with the needs of that particular family. Community relations were maintained. The decking platform on agreement has been now removed, and all families can go on positively rather than leaving a stain where someone has won and someone has lost. Everybody got something out of that, and again, it's a sort of strategy that I try to use wherever and whenever possible. In conclusion, I also reported to the committee at my last visit the historic issue of roadside advertising. I am absolutely delighted to say that roadside advertising has not returned, and I think that demonstrates that once we go in hard on something, we set the stall out. Local businesses and others know the regime we're now working on, and compliance has been achieved with very little work. The one caveat I would say to that, Mr. Fireworks Man from a town centre shop has put one of his trailers out. I went to visit him yesterday and gave him the benefit of my advice, and I'm assured on 5 AM on the 6th of November, the said trailer will be gone. But again, it's about keeping on top of these things. So I'm quite happy to answer any questions the committee would have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Gordon. That was a really precise report, and well done with all your successes, and for being so diplomatic as well, Gordon. It's quite nice to hear. Anybody got any questions? There's no hands up at the moment. Anybody got anything for Gordon?
Just one, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. Madam Chair.
Yep.
Thanks, Gordon, for your very full and precise account of what you've been doing over the last few months. There's just the one on Mill Wood where you removed the caravans.
Oh.
Was there any cost to the authority for that or not?
I'm sorry, Chair. Could you relay that message? It didn't come quite through.
I think he's talking about the caravans in Mill Wood.
Yeah, I mean, that has been a particularly problematic case. You'll recall the committee determined that application last year, and it was somewhat acrimonious then. And there are two distinct groups within this scenario. And again, I go back to the win-lose and the win-win situation. I suspect that some of the parties see this as having lost the battle. The caravans remained there during lockdown, and obviously my ability to get out and be as forceful as I would have liked was limited. It prompted us to start the legal proceeding by requesting the owner provide us with information that would allow us to move the issue on. that very much prompted a very, very adverse reaction from them, to the extent that they wouldn't engage with me at all. But the outset was they actually removed the caravans and did exactly the very things that we were asking them to do. So ultimately that worked. It is disappointing that the acrimony between the various parties does continue. I suspect without careful support, and I've had an awful lot of really good support from Jason on this one, they will gladly pull the council into their little war and use us to try and win battles over each other. So I'm very mindful of that, but I'm grateful for the fact that we've got the land to where we wanted it to be, and hopefully we can try and manage expectation down there.
No,
Okay,
thank you.
Colin.
Yes, smashing that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Bill McEwen.
Councillor McEwen, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say thanks, Gordon, for a very efficient report as always, and the good work that you do. I'm glad to see that the A boards have all been moved, and hopefully they don't come back again as you come along to our subgroup, highway subgroup, and reported this matter to us. So well done, Gordon. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful.
We might need them back to cover the big spaces where the trees are missing, Bill.
Give us a break, Anne, and you probably will.
Okay, well, thanks, Gordon. That was wonderful. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. And keep up the good work. Thank you. Right, so we go on to the next application, which is probably going to be far more far more troublesome than most of the others that we've had today. It's the proposed works to trees in Barrow conservation areas. We all got them on the white sheet, a great big long list of all these trees county highways are going to chop down or lop or decimate is the word I'd use when they do crown reduction and and everything. I hope they've got decent people doing it, otherwise some of these trees won't grow back and then we'll be really mad. Right, who's doing this one?
That's me, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Maureen.
Thank you, thanks. As members are aware, Cumbria County Council Highways team have undertaken a full survey of the highway trees in Barrow. It's quite some time since this has been taking place, so we're quite pleased that they've actually surveyed all of the trees. And the recommendation is some maintenance work for many trees and the removal of some others. Highway safety is a big push in this application in terms of trying to make sure the signs are visible for residents and pedestrians, and some of the pedestrian crossings aren't covered by trees. So in total, there's maintenance works to quite a lot of trees, but 11 trees are to be removed that are within the conservation area. There's no powers under the legislation to prevent the works taking place, and the only option is either to impose a tree preservation order, but because the trees that are being removed are dead or dying, then they don't meet the criteria to have a TPO placed on them. So the recommendation is that the tree works are agreed, however, that we do write to the County Council and express a concern that trees are being removed and not replaced. They're really so important to Barrow in terms of climate change, aesthetics, how the health and well-being of the community. There's just so many benefits from trees, and the county are actually working with us on that. So the tree works, as I say, we're not able to prevent the works taking place because they're not TPO'd trees. The legislation as such for conservation areas doesn't allow us to request or require replacement, should I say. But I do feel in this case that we should write to the County Council and ask that they work with us to try and ensure these trees are replaced when the opportunity arises, and that we work together to agree some sort of maintenance regime going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I've got you, Bill. It's a very difficult situation because, you know, if the trees aren't replanted, eventually the town is not going to look anything like it looks now, and especially the conservation areas. I know you can get, I know Theresa, Councillor Sue, gets free trees, but, you know, will the County Council work with somebody who work with the Woodland Trust to get trees and which we can replant? you know, I don't know if that's feasible, whether you can actually get free trees for county councils, but I'm sure there must be somebody who will help us and give us some trees. Bill?
Thank you, Anne, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Maureen. Yeah, and as you said, I agree with totally with everything you say. I don't want to see trees chopped down and wrecked and taken away. And as Maureen said, it's for safety, and we've got to go ahead with this. I'm looking at the recommendation, and I welcome the recommendation. And it says take it back to the County Council Highway subgroup, which I chair, which I will do. I'll take your sentiments along and tell them the situation, but plus write to them as well. But I will do what I can do. I'm looking at 3.5, where it says there are currently no plans or budget to replace trees being removed. I have been advised that this is a result of a decision that we did. We took this a bit ago, but there was no budget. But I'm sure what the chair said, there must be somebody out there who can help with trees, and I will take it to the table and see what we can do. That's the best I can do. Thank you, Chair.
I think getting out of this meeting without being absolutely berated, Bill, is the best you'll manage today, love. Councillor Sood.
Thanks, Chair.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Sood.
Just to say, the free tree scheme, they are very small saplings, and I don't really think they probably would be appropriate for planting on public highway spaces. But I'm quite happy to speak with the Woodland Trust and see, cost out slightly more substantial plants that we would possibly be able to use.
That's wonderful, thank you. Right, Jeff Dow, could you want to come in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just to echo what the previous councillor said, that the Woodland Trust does give free trees to local authorities and community groups, and we've already accessed some of that and are planting trees with local schools. Alison Cowards leading on that. And I think the problem is with Abbey Road is, as Maureen said, it's the maintenance side and obviously putting the trees in situ. And I would certainly recommend that Maureen goes back to the County Council and tries to get a commitment from them first, and we use the Woodland Trust as a backup if that fails. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Right, anybody else got the hand up? No, I haven't got anybody else.
Well, no, Chair, there isn't.
I don't think any of us are in agreement with this. I'm sure Bill will take our concerns back to the County Council, because it's just ridiculous. I know for safety reasons you've got to take some down, but it's just ridiculous to lop them so far down, the ones that they're keeping, because they might not come back next year. Okay, do you agree with that recommendation? Do you need to take a roll call on this, Sharon?
No, Chair, if there's consensus of the meeting.
So do we all agree that recommendation under real stress, and we've told Bill what he needs to do?
Agreed, and I will do my best at the county. Thank you very much. Yep.
Right, thank you very much. Right, that's the end of our meeting. So the live stream can go offline.